Well, we're joined by Betty Guadagno, and Betty, it's really great to have you here because as we were visiting before we started this segment, I think people your age in the near-death experience movement are so necessary because if you look at the world today, it looks like it's gone to hell in a handbasket. Give us your story and then we'll talk about how you would deal with that. But your story's just remarkable. It's had so many ups and downs and enlighten the audience about
Yes.
what happened.
Thank you for this space. This is amazing what you're doing, creating conscious space for experiencers so we can shift the awareness and make these extraordinary experiences ordinary experiences. And I love being able to be with somebody who has decided to hold that space for others. So, yeah, my story is very rich in contrast. So, I'll just preface it with a trigger warning. I grew up in a very chaotic, dysfunctional family, a cycle of addiction and poverty and sexual trauma and physical trauma, anything that you could imagine that is a very dense human experience happened in my family. And I learned at a very young age that drugs were the answer to dismantling any sort of negative emotion. I would watch my parents, I would watch them struggle and just be in like these states of depression or mania. And I saw that if they smoked something or took a pill or they drank something, their whole mood changed. And I made all these mental notes as a child. I said, as soon as I'm able to, I'm gonna do the same thing. Because I had experienced a lot of pain in early childhood and I definitely did not want to feel those feelings. And so my addiction started at a very young age and it just really took off. And I watched my parents' addiction just absolutely disintegrate them as people. And in 2007, my parents were facing another eviction, and we moved at least once a year throughout the entirety of my life. And they're about to be evicted again for not paying the rent. The lights were turned off, the gas was turned off. They were really at the end of the road. And they made this decision that they had to end their suffering and stop using drugs. And the only way that they knew how to do that was to kill themselves. And so in 2007, my parents completed suicide with one another. And this trauma obviously shaped the rest of
How
my
old
life.
were you?
I was 23. My sister was 18. We found them.
Oh my gosh.
They left these really brief notes, and I didn't explain much, but they didn't even have to because I understood how debilitating addiction is. And the physical pain of withdrawal from opiates. This was the height of the Oxycontin epidemic, and they were prescribed over 1,000 pills each every month. And every month they still ran out. And it would just be this unbearable pain to watch them go through physical withdrawal. And this particular time, they were going through withdrawal again. They picked up their refills and they decided just to eat all the pills at once. And it was a tragic scene. But as soon as my parents left Earth, my addiction stepped in and became my parent. It became my higher power, my whole universe. I'm even covered in tattoos of liquor bottles and packs of cigarettes. It branded me. This was my whole life, my entire identity. My addiction said, you can't stop using drugs because you'll let go of the legacy of your family. No matter how messed up the legacy is, you have to continue with me. And I just believed it. My addiction I abandoned my sister. I moved across the country. She was just a little kid. She was 18 years old. And I was like, I can't deal with this. And I went with my addiction somewhere else. I've been married and divorced a handful of times. My addiction came before every partner, everything in my life. I didn't have space in my life for any thoughts. And eventually my addiction really started to progress and I could no longer keep a job. I became a prostitute. I was on the verge of homelessness many, many times throughout my life. And in 2019, I experienced a drug overdose. Surprise, I took too many drugs. Who would have thought? I would have thought for sure. And I had this very spiritually transformative experience in my overdose. And the first part of it was like a life review. And it was tragic because I wasn't just a traumatized person. I just shared a bunch of trauma that I went through, but I was a traumatized person who maliciously, intentionally traumatized other people all the time. I wanted people to feel as badly as I did in my life. And so I was super harmful, very manipulative, very abusive, domineering, ruthless, maniacal.
So in that experience, did you viscerally feel what you did to others?
Absolutely, absolutely. But it was very quick. Like everything is happening instantaneously. And as I was experiencing that, then I started to feel everything that's ever happened in the whole human experience. It felt like I was having a life review for the entire collective, because I was experiencing things that I didn't experience in life. Like childbirth was part of my life review, but I have never had a child. A child dying was part of my life review, but that's never happened. That's not my experience. And so it really felt like I was just feeling this whole collective thing. Like, what is Earth about? Here are some of the experiences on Earth. And then I felt my parents' suicide from their perspective and my perspective as a grieving daughter. And that anguish, that despair, it felt like I was drowning and I was covered in concrete and static and spikes, and it was so overwhelming. And I thought, okay, I died and I'm in hell, and this is what the world is. And then I started to hear these very benevolent voices. And one of them was my father, who had completed suicide 11 years before. And he just kept saying, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And so I followed his voice. And that's when I landed into the space of eternity in the light. And the first part of my experience looked a lot like a spaceship. I kind of landed on the deck of this ship, and there was a commander in the center, and it was just this bright, beautiful light, and just felt like love. And you can call that light Christ or Krishna or Buddha or Source. It's all the same thing. And I was with thousands of other souls, and we were gearing up for our jump to Earth. And the commander was saying that we're being sent to Earth on a great mission. The Great Awakening is underway as we depart for our mission, and that we're going to liberate consciousness here on Earth. And then my awareness shifted to another scene where I was in front of a table of beings, and they were thumbing through this big book. And they didn't tell me who they were, but they didn't have to, because I absolutely knew that they were people in charge of me or the world or something. They were just definitely in charge. And they're like, oh, it's flipping through the book. It's great to see you. You're not meant to stay. You're just here for information. And I'm like looking all around me. I'm like, you guys, you're not talking to me, are you? Because I don't know where I am, but it feels groovy, and I'm definitely staying here. And then my awareness starts to shift, and I'm understanding where I am, who they are, what's happening. And they said, nope, you're not meant to stay. We're going to tell you about your pre-birth plan so that you can get on to your righteous path, your spiritual path. And so they took me into this space that looked a lot like a grocery store. I had this big empty grocery cart, and lining the walls of the grocery store aisles were these gigantic cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. And I knew that I was coming to Earth for the Great Awakening. And so I was going to have to transmute a lot of collective trauma. And so I started grabbing every cereal box that I could. And, you know, like dense experiences, addiction, prostitution, homelessness, picking my parents, picking the family line that I would be born into. And the one part of it that I always think is very important to share about is that when I picked the life experience of childhood sexual trauma, a little orb of light came out with the box. And that orb of light was the soul of the man who would molest me as a small child. And we came orb to orb with each other, and we came into contract. And I saw all the reasons why. And one of the main reasons was that in a previous incarnation, I had been his abuser in that capacity. And so in this lifetime, we were balancing that out. And, you know, being downloaded with this awareness of a pre-birth plan, it felt like 2 tons of bondage had been released from me. I felt so free. I was no longer a victim to my circumstance. I was actually a divine co-creator of my reality. This had all been pre-plotted out for me. So I'm back in front of the table of beings, and I'm so grateful, and I'm on my knees in gratitude. Thank you for showing me this. I feel so much freer. I'm still not going back to Earth, but I really appreciate all this information. And they were like, you have to go back. You signed up for the mission. I said, no, I'm going to grab my PJs and a bowl of popcorn. I'll watch the show from up here. I think it's going to be really good, but I'm just going to go lay on the couch. And they said, listen, you're not going back to Earth as a punishment. You're going back because you signed up for something and you need to complete it. And I said, you guys don't tell us what Earth is actually like. I'm not doing this. And they said, yeah, you say this every time that you come back home. You say the same thing every time. And then I saw that if I didn't go back into the body that I had just came from, this body, that I would be reborn into a new baby. And they showed me the baby and everything about her life plan, who her parents would be, where she would be born, her adversity, her parts of her purpose. And I thought, and she had to do my life cart. She was going to take my grocery cart into her body. And I thought, no way. There's no way I can do this from zero. If these are really my only choices, I'll just go back into the body that I just came from. But I kept affirming to them that she's broken, she's glitched. Look at all the damage that she's done to herself. There's no way that this can be healed. And they said, listen, the first part of your life was boot camp, and the second part of your life will be carrying out your mission. You're going to have soulmates and mentors and teachers and communities. You're going to be supported. It's going to be so much easier. Trust us. And I was like, I do not trust you guys. And then I found my awareness back in my body.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start at the beginning. So many of the experiencers say there's a reintegration period, like when they come back here from over there.
Right.
And we're reluctant like you were and say, nah, I'm good. I'll just stay here. And who wouldn't want to, right? To come back down here, especially in your chronicle of experiences. How long did it take you to hit the ground running? What kind of assimilation, or is it still going on?
Oh yeah, I think integration is a forever thing. And that's part of the fun of the human experience journey. But I just wrote my experience off as drug-induced psychosis. All I knew was that I took a bunch of drugs and then I thought I was talking to God. And so I just thought, well, wow, I was really messed up. I'll never be that high again. That was crazy. And it took me months of my guides throwing signs and synchronicities and removing people from my life. Like, my guides took all my drug dealers out of my life on the exact same day, like 10 different men. I'd call each of them, like on this long list of dealers. And every time I'd call them, they'd be like, no, I'm out of the game. I found Jesus. I want to be a good father. Click. The next guy, same story. But these men didn't know each other. And it was just like everything was being removed for me to find this very narrow path that I was going to have to go down.
And how long did that take?
So my experience happened on March 23rd of 2019. I finally found my way into rehab and stopped using drugs on June 1st, 2019. So about 2 or 3 months it took for me to really realize that this was a real experience. But I just thought that I was dead. And I thought that I had to do recovery to get back to heaven. So every time I would make it to a recovery milestone, I would cry out to God. I'm like, hey, God, I haven't used drugs in 7 days. That's amazing. Please come pick me up now. And like no response. And then I'd make it to another milestone, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. I'm like, when are you guys coming to get me? I feel like a kid who's been left at school, please. And it took me a while to integrate and realize that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here.
Good for you.
And so every day I make a conscious effort to call the energy of heaven. And it's really in connecting with other people. That's where I feel most heaven-like.
Well, and I really believe, our mission, obviously, editorially would be to articulate experiences like yours, especially in your age group. Because like I told you before, I have daughters who are 31 and 29. And the world from their purview looks like we're all gone to hell in a handbasket, but fortunately we have a good, solid family unit and we're able to support them through, this tough way to navigate through this madness, what it appears to be madness. But you shared with me, and so did Bree, who's going to be here later, that to you, it's almost like a simulation. This is like a video game, right? So that's the lexicon of your age group, that you're the archetype for them that they can really identify with is that simulation. Explain that a little bit more, because people like us who are longer in the tooth grew up with Pong, and Pac-Man.
And I think that's why part of my experience did look like a video game, because that was the information that I was meant to translate here when I was ready to share about it. But there's other analogies too. Like, this is a movie. We're actors and actresses. And as far as the video game concept goes, the game itself is the big boss of the video game. So like in every video game, there's a bad guy, right? In Mario, there's King Koopa. He's the guy that you have to defeat in the end, and you're going through all these levels. But in this video game, in Sims Earth, the big boss of the game is actually the landscape that we live in. So this is a dream that we're inside of. And A Course in Miracles, which is a spiritual text that I study, very humbly and very regularly. So in A Course in Miracles, it says that this is a dream that we're inside of. Now, I don't need to focus on the outer dream, because the outer dream is crazy. it's doing its job. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to distract me from my soul's mission. My soul's mission is to come here, spread light, spread joy, connect with other souls, things like that. So if I'm focusing on all of this perceived chaos in the world, and I'm not dismissing the fact that there are things going on in the world that are very real for people, but the knowledge of the pre-birth plan helps me to understand that those people signed up for that.
Right.
I don't understand why. I don't have like this big bird's eye view of why, but I just have faith today. I have faith that it's all working out. If my life can transform that way, then spirit can do anything for anybody's life.
I think you're infused with spirit. I mean, it's palpable. Your energy extends way beyond your physical countenance. It's something that I see in yourself and Bree and the younger NDEers. It's almost like an evolution of the NDE to be more salient with what's going on today, that's more appropriate for people in your age group and even people in our age group to be able to identify with. When you look at the landscape of the world that you operate in now, what do you think are some of the major obstacles that people are trying to work through?
Well, I think that because my pain has alchemized into my purpose, the people that I have an opportunity to work with or interact with are typically people that are dealing with some kind of addiction. And it doesn't mean drug addiction necessarily. It could be food addiction, technology addiction, porn and masturbating, codependency. There's all these different kinds of addictions that we have, things that distract us from our soul's purpose. So, as far as my soul mission goes, I interact with that a lot, but everybody has a particular experience or a particular mission that's designed exactly for them. And your purpose is in your pain. Whatever was like the most traumatizing thing for you in your life, that's definitely where you're supposed to be helping others.
Well, I remember my old man always said, you grow through adversity. I mean, adversity is what sharpens the iron, right? I mean, we can all handle a good time, big bank account, great wife and kids, nobody fails. That doesn't exist. That's nirvana. That's over there, right? But we're here on this landscape. To navigate through this on a daily basis, do you have to reorient constantly? Or is it now more habituated, this new lifestyle that you have enacted based on your experiences?
It took me a long time to accept the fact that I wasn't going back to heaven, because I really thought that that was what I was working towards. And I mean, I will go back there eventually, but I wanted it to be very quickly. And it took me a long time to acclimate to that. But I have a lot of grounding tools today. I've done a lot of inner work. You don't have to die to experience transformation in your life. I use all these tools because it wasn't as if I came back from the experience and I was all better. I had my body, my epigenetics are pre-programmed to do certain things to cope with life. So I had to figure out how to cope with just regular life, with feelings, not just depression and sadness. I don't know how to handle joy and elation because those feelings are very unfamiliar to me. So when I start to experience success in my life, joy, happiness, that's when I'm most uncomfortable.
Do you recoil a little bit?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Yes, it's all so cringe to me. Now I'm getting much better at it as the years are going by, thank goodness. But I use a lot of different tools. I study A Course in Miracles. It's a self-study. It's a beautiful text. It's a little dense. At first, I thought it was a handbook for the recently deceased. I was like, oh yeah, this is like the movie Beetlejuice. Where's my caseworker who helps me understand what all of this means? I found a beautiful Course in Miracles community, and they did help me understand. And I practice the 12 steps in a 12-step program. I do shadow work where I dissect the different pieces of myself and I offer them love and forgiveness on a daily basis. And now it's just kind of like baseline. That's what my experience is, unless things start to get really turbulent. And then I got to go back to the basics. I have a bunch of tools. I've done all of this inner work. It took me a really long time. I was in treatment in long-term rehab for 1.5 years. I didn't have access to a cell phone or a computer for that amount of time, which is its own accomplishment. But in that time, I just kept educating myself because I had never used my mind before. I didn't articulate any words. This vocabulary that I have today is all from spirit, absolutely 100%, and the ability to re-educate myself.
But you are the all of all. So it's from you. I think, at least from my purview, I think that we try to acknowledge the gifts from outside of ourselves. And there's a part of that because consciousness is, and we're all a part of consciousness. But You seem to be so self-deprecating, and your comedy is wonderful. I think comedy is a great elixir for people. Just don't take life so seriously.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
not
don't
even real.
understand. And yeah, well, that's a big point. But how hard was it for you to reintegrate to just being happy?
Yeah, well, I had never really experienced happiness in my adult life. You know, after my parents died, happiness was kind of a real fleeting thing, but I did experience the illusion of happiness from drugs. So that's why I kept medicating and sedating myself, because every once in a while I would get that feeling of what I was chasing.
But you can never replicate that.
Never, never. I just kept chasing and chasing and chasing. And today, you know, I find happiness in the littlest things, you know, like holding a door open for a stranger or smiling at somebody on the subway. And I know that I'm worthy of a beautiful life today. I didn't know that before, but today I'm absolutely 100% certain that we are all infinitely worthy of divinity, compassion, kindness, happiness.
Well, in the life review to me, and you mentioned that briefly, and they're not the same, and they're not, and all NDE experiencers don't have a life review. But the impetus for a happy life is being giving, right? Because it always feels good to give a smile. Like you said, open a door for someone. Be genuine about your affirmation to the world, whether it's nature, whether it happens to be an individual who appears to have the appearance of being homeless and destitute. It's like the old parable of Buddha. Buddha walks past the group on the pilgrimage, and he's a beggar, and they're disparaging him, and they turn around and there's Buddha, and he goes, now what do you think of me, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we're all divine in
Yeah.
our own birthright, right?
And we're all mirrors to each other. Every single one of us. The person that you despise the most in the world, that's a mirror to you. That's a mirror to your shadow. Whatever it is that you dislike about them, it's some piece of yourself that you've rejected. It's some piece that you find unlovable, but all of our pieces are lovable. And we really truly are all mirrors to each other.
How would you define God for you?
God is source. It's the source of energy that I come from as a piece of energy. And it's infinite and it's loving and kind. And there's no such thing as condemnation. I think that's the biggest takeaway from my experience. When I entered the space of heaven, I was an atheist. I was a homeless meth head prostitute. I was an orphan to suicide, a liar, manipulator, thief, racist, rapist, I was an evil person, you know? I mean, for lack of a better word, I was really a maniacal, ruthless human being. And I made it to heaven. So if I made it to heaven, everybody's going. I mean, if I made it, literally everybody's going.
But you modeled the behavior that you were accustomed to, right? That was the environment that you grew up in. Now, you had choices, obviously.
Absolutely.
But you chose to model the behavior, so you can't lay it all at your own doorstep.
I think I was probably next level to my parents, definitely. Like, I didn't watch them be like that. I watched them crumble apart and just really become nothing. That's what addiction did to them. For me, I was just like so full of rage and so full of resentment towards God. That's why I didn't believe in God, because I was like, what kind of creator would let all this crazy shit happen to me? This is nuts. And so I just stayed hidden from God because it seemed easier. But after my experience, I know 1,000% that God exists. God loves me. God loves all of us. And, you know, I could have kept living my life like a maniac if I wanted to, despite the fact that my guides were making everything impossible for me. But I choose to live in a more spiritually aligned way today because it feels better. This is the feeling that I was chasing with drugs my whole life, the feeling that I experienced just from waking up today.
So if you could articulate to people who are going through similar yet different, or maybe just anxiety or depression, what are some of the keys for people who haven't had this transformative experience to be able to borrow from yourself and other experiencers that they can tangibly implement daily to live a more joyous life while we're on this plane of existence?
Absolutely. So gratitude, I know this sounds like super corny, right? Like just be grateful. But no, gratitude really is the cheat code to manifesting your reality. You can utilize the law of attraction in your healing process. I'm really into affirmation, but to get even deeper, because affirmations won't work if you still have an underlying wound. So if I have this, you know, pussy gaping wound on my spiritual body and I affirm, I am a millionaire. The universe is like, girl, you are not a millionaire. Chill out, okay? So I have to heal all those underlying wounds. So something that I use that I think is really helpful is I do shadow work or parts work. In the Western world, we would call it parts work, internal family system, where
What does that mean?
it means that you dissect the different parts of yourself. So let's say somebody's dealing with anxiety and depression. Make a character around that part of you. So I'll talk about my own story. I have addiction, issues with addiction. So I've named and given a personality and a shape to my addiction. His name is Richard. He's a gay man. He thinks that he's so fabulous, but he's a hot mess. He wears a white linen suit. He lives inside of a glass house inside my mind. He puts his mouth up to the creases of the house and he's like, let's have a drink. And I'm like, Richard, chill out. We don't do that. He's like, it'll be so fun. And so I get to communicate with him. And so I know when I'm acting out of my addiction because I can call into the pieces of myself and find out who needs attention right now. Same thing with anxiety. You know, like those anxious thoughts, and anxiety is so fast and it's so tricky. But if you can give it a little bit of character development around it, and just, you know, something I do is I sprinkle my parts with pink light every morning. And now it's like it's muscle memory. But my inner saboteur, her name's Marcy. She looks like the chick from The Ring. She's like really super scary. And, you know, she was really destroying pieces of my life. And I sat with her, I talked with her, I said, what do you need? And she said, you know, I want to come with you. Don't leave me. Because she, in my head, is unlovable, right? She looks kind of like a monster. And so every morning I sprinkle her in this pink light and she becomes fuzzy and she's no longer scary. And it's, you know, that really helps with anxiety as well. And those are some great tools that I use. I also do just things for my physical health that really help my mental health. I only drink water. I eat clean. I exercise my body. I journal. I meditate. I don't like sit on a pillow for 20 minutes or anything. I meditate while I exercise because I'm focused on my breathing. And, you know, like it's those couple of things can really change your life. It's truly, really. I mean, I didn't know that. I just thought like, oh, I'm a victim to this circumstance. I'm a victim to this world. Some people take the information about pre-birth planning and they go, oh, well, I guess I planned a really shitty life. No way. Nobody does that. If you are experiencing something, you also signed up to experience the opposite of it. Again, we might not know exactly what that looks like, but you definitely have. So if you're dealing with depression, you didn't sign up to be a depressed person and die from depression in your life.
Right.
You signed up to experience depression and then overcoming that and helping others that are also dealing with that.
Right. So you have spiritual autonomy. You know, the outline was created, but you can still manipulate the outline to the degree that you have free will, right? So you don't have to choose the life that you had that you thought was your life. You've extricated yourself from that. You've created the new model, and good for you. I mean, you know, I remember a story with our youngest daughter when she was young, similar to your shadow work, where she was really scared of Chucky, the doll Chucky. So when the psychologist talked to her and said, this is Chucky, he's an actor. He's on Wikipedia. See him? He plays a character. That's not real. So then she could integrate that experience in with something that made sense to her, based, like you said, on the shadow work, like these other illusory parts of who you deem your character to be.
Right. Yeah, because in real truth, I'm nothing but spirit. But I came to Earth to play a personality. This is my costume in the play of life. And the costume also has personality traits assigned to it. And so, you know, I have to really integrate and love all those pieces of myself.
Do you have anything in closing that you would like to say? Because I really believe that you and others like you that are the younger torch bearers of the NDE community are going to lead your group forward. And I really have hope for the future. I mean, a lot of people are pessimistic, but do you have a soliloquy that you usually end with?
I feel called to say that, you know, if you're somebody who's dealing with something that seems very dark, a lot of people who watch NDE videos are either on their way out of life or they've had an experience themselves, or there's somebody they're wrestling with mental health issues. And so if you're somebody who needs help, please reach out for support. There's so much support out there. It's so hard to take that step to do something different. Do it anyway. It's all very uncomfortable stepping out of your comfort zone. Do it anyway. You came here with a purpose. find it. It's in you, you know, like purpose is not rigid. It can change on a daily basis. Opening the door for somebody is part of my purpose today, you know, or, you know, being kind is part of my purpose today. Things shift and change, but just please reach out for support. You can reach out to me personally, and I can shepherd you to some communities where there's just an abundance of love and acceptance and healing waiting for you.
Where can people find your signature on the web, as it were?
So I'm on all social media. My handle on everything is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words. And again, I would really be super willing and very eager to hear from anybody who needs support.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.